I'm so happy to be here in this lead up to Shabbat. And what a powerful Torah portion to kind of guide us into. There's so many angles and so much to get into, but I'm just going to try and focus very specifically on one, this powerful transformational moment where, if you've been following along, Jacob is fleeing, or he's in this fearful moment where he's going to be kind of eventually reuniting with his brother Esau, who he believes wants to kill him and might be really angry at him. And so he kind of sends off all of his family, and he sends a lot of things ahead of him, and he's alone. And in that moment of aloneness, he has this like wrestling match, this very famous wrestling match with, we don't exactly know what, with maybe God, with maybe an angel, with maybe some version of himself. And I'm going to read you the text and maybe we'll share it on the screen, but you don't have to get too involved in the details. I want to just particularly bring your attention to the pronouns, because the pronouns are confusing. There is almost seemingly intentional pronoun confusion, meaning who is doing what with whom, who's doing where, what's happening to whom. So Jacob was left alone, and a figure wrestled with him until the break of dawn. A figure. When he saw that he saw, who, we don't know, that he, we don't know, had not prevailed against him, who, we don't know, he, we don't know, wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he, we don't know, wrestled with him. So a lot of he's and hims. A grammar teacher would tear their hair out at this sentence, like, who are you talking about? Then he said, let me go, for dawn is breaking. But he answered, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Said the other, what is your name? He replied, Jacob, Yaakov. Said he, your name shall no longer be Yaakov, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed. Jacob, Yaakov asked, pray tell me your name. But he said, you must not ask my name. And he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, meaning, I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping on his hip. So interesting, so confusing with all of these pronouns and like, give me your name, give me another name. Who's naming who? What's happening to who? Whom? So I wanted to introduce just two quick sources, additional sources in here. So we'll go back to the sheet. So this is a little piece of text that is kind of elaborating on the parsha. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, the Torah writes, as he wrestled with him, and in the voice of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is picking out this word, behavko, as a person embraces, chovek. So using the same root words, his friend. Interesting, right? We've been thinking it's wrestling, almost like a violent act. And yet this rabbi is suggesting, no, the wrestling is in the same way of like an embrace or a hug. So something interesting happening there. And then I want to put forth this poem to kind of close out the texts. It's a poem by Louise Gluck, and it's called The Horse and Rider. Once there was a horse, and on the horse there was a rider. How handsome they looked in the autumn sunlight, approaching a strange city. People thronged the streets or called from the high windows. Old women sat among flower pots. But when you looked about for another horse or another rider, you looked in vain. My friend, said the animal, why not abandon me? Alone, you can find your way here. But to abandon you, said the other, would be to leave a part of myself behind. And how can I do that when I do not know which part you are? So, kind of takes a couple of readings to understand what's going on. But I just want to kind of hone in on this little conversation that they're having with each other. When you looked around about for another horse or another rider, you looked in vain. My friend, said the animal, why not abandon me? Alone, you can find your way here. But to abandon you, said the other, would be to leave a part of myself behind. And how can I do that when I do not know which part you are? To me, this kind of strange, dreamlike scenario of a horse and a rider trying to disentangle themselves, and yet they can't. They're part of each other, is similar to this Parsha, this week's Parsha, this pronoun confusion, this name confusion of who is wrestling or embracing who and what is happening. And for our purposes today, I want to suggest, and we can take the source sheet out if you want to read this poem. Natalie put it into the chat, later. But I want us to just kind of like think about what we're in the process of wrestling with, of kind of like fighting or trying to struggle with right now in this moment. Maybe it's a big change that's happening for you. Maybe it's anxieties or worries. Maybe it's like future things, aging, some people that you can't control, a big decision you have to make. What is on your heart in this moment? What is being kind of wrestled within you? And what if, like this textual source suggested, that it's actually the process of the wrestling is actually like a sacred thing. It's like we're also embracing. We're not wrestling to get rid of. Nobody's going to be the winner or the loser. We don't know which part is which. We're kind of like wrestling to figure out what our next transformation is. It's the butterfly that kind of, the caterpillar that kind of turns into goop, reforms itself, and then becomes the butterfly. Like, this is the process, the grappling, the moving around of the parts of ourselves that need to, in order to be who we're meant to be, in order to inhabit our next chapter or the next moment, or how we need to emerge in the world. That's Jacob, right? He gets this new name because he's on a new journey and he needs to embody this new thing from the hips. And I love that. Anybody that knows anything about the Vedic system, the chakra system, knows that in the hips is where we store emotions. It's where we store creativity. And it's the seat of like the healing from our earliest relationships. There's a lot happening in what's called the second chakra, or that area in the stomach, the lower back, and the hips. So it's a good place for us to focus today, unless it's a place of great pain for you, in which case I would not recommend it. But if it feels okay for you, that might be where we begin this journey, this exploration, this embracing of what it is that we're grappling with. So I want to invite you, you can close your eyes, you can softly focus them in front of you, and you can relax and release your shoulders, open them up and let them just relax down your back. Taking a few deep breaths to settle the body, to settle the mind, and to arrive here in this moment, this mini withdrawal or aloneness moment in our day, in our life, to attend to what is grappling. If it helps to put a hand on your heart, a hand on your belly, or again, if it feels okay for you, you can place your hands on your hips or close to them to feel into this low energy where all of these swirling things are live. Each breath is a chance to just soften and release a little bit more. You can feel the way your seat is supporting you, connecting your hips to your legs, all the way down to the floor. Tuning into the things that we're grappling with, the places of growth, of change. And as best as you can, you don't have to solve it or fix it. You can't leave one part behind. To just make room with each breath, to make space around this process of change and transformation. Releasing the story, the narrative, the trying to figure out what is going to win, what needs to be fixed, what's the solution. Just returning to this moment, to what is unfolding. And if it feels okay, you can keep bringing your attention to what is happening in your belly and your low back. To the sensations, to the feelings, to the sense of being supported and held in this moment. Your mind is like a runaway train. That's okay. It's what the mind does. You can softly keep returning. What's here? What's in this body? What's in this room? What's right here in the area around your hips, your belly, your back? What is supporting you? Releasing the stories again and again, coming back, allowing each one to be just as it is. Allowing whatever sacred wrestling matches are taking place within you. Trusting that the sun will come up again, that you'll go on your way again when the time is right. Surrendering as best as you can to this process of this moment. you'd like, you can set an intention rooted all the way down in your hips, that low part of your body, the seat of creativity and healing. What intention would you like to manifest, to carry through this weekend, this Shabbat, this next week? What do you want to remember? Who do you want to be? And as you set that intention, feel free to breathe it in deep, deep, deep into your body, imagining it going all the way down into your low belly, your back, your hips, moving all the way through your body as you breathe it in and send it around your body so that it becomes a part of you, inseparable from who you are. And when you're ready, at your own pace, you're welcome to open your eyes if they're closed and to bring your attention back together for Kaddish. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yael. Close that beautiful practice, as Yael said, by offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning or serving a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish, to do so. If you're not reciting Kaddish, please stay present for those who are for a few minutes, offering them their compassion and support in their time of mourning. You can put the name or names of anyone you're honoring today in the chat now or after you recite Kaddish. Thanks to Natalie for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. And if you're reciting it, please join me by rising in body or in spirit. You can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Vitkadash, Shemei Rabba, Yalma, Dibra, Chayute, Yamich, Malchute, Chayecho, Yomechon, Chaye, V'chol, Israel, Ba'agalat, Kariv, Imru, Amen.
Amen.
Ishmei, Rabba,
Rabba
Mevarach,
Marach Leolam Ulamel Maya.
Barach, Yishtabach, V'Pa'ar, V'Am V'Yitze, V'Hadar, V'Dalel, V'Shem, V'Kadosh. Le'elam, Mikol Birchata V'Shivata, V'Chata V'Nechemata, V'Amiran Ba'alma, Amru, Amen.
Amen.
Hey, Shlama Rabbanim Shemayim,
Shemaim.
Hayin
Hainu
Aleinu,
Aleinu,
Yael, Baruch, Amen.
Amen.
Aseh Shalom B'Mimav,
Amen.
Aseh Shalom Aleinu, Yisrael, Yaakov Yoshe Tevel, Amru, Amen.
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 Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. We want to thank Marion Ross for sponsoring our sit today in honor of Rabbi Jenny Solomon and in memory of Dr. Kenneth Seitler, and Lori Fisher for sponsoring also in honor of the 20th yard site of her beloved father, Professor Israel Lou Fisher. May his memory be a blessing. You're welcome, of course, to stay on for conversation with our teacher today, Yael Shy, about this beautiful, beautiful teaching and practice that enabled us to embody that famous wrestling match that's described in this week's Parsha by Yishlach. If you're leaving us now, we hope you have a wonderful and sweet restorative Shabbat. We all need that. And we hope we'll see you back here on Monday. Monday is the 15th of Kislev, full moon of Kislev, hard to believe. We'll be led, as we always are, on or near the full moon by Jenna Sadaka of At the Well. And we have a full week of practice next week, Monday through Friday. So we hope you'll join us then. But until then, we wish you a sweet Shabbat and a good weekend. Thanks to Natalie, of course, for holding us together. And if you have a question for Yael, please put it in the chat and preface it by writing question in caps, and I'll keep an eye out, try to work that into the conversation. That was really just so powerful. Yael, thank you so much. I just want to step back, kind of a meta observation question, I guess. Anyway, invite you to reflect on this. I I really appreciated and was thinking, wow, this is amazing that we can read this amazing story in the Torah portion, and people, Jews all over the world are going to be studying it, the Shabbat. But what's different about this, I want to point this out, is that we're actually immersing in that story. We're actually noticing how that story is happening within us right now. We are Jacob. At an IGS event last Shabbat, I invoked a very old TV show, which some people here probably will remember, called "You Are There." It was hosted by Walter Cronkite, and I think earlier Edward R. Murrow is like where they sent reporters to historical scenes, like some CBS News reporter standing by as Jacob is wrestling with the angel on the scene. And I thought, that's really it. You are there. We are there. We are here, or there is here. So before we even get into the details, I just wanted to see. I think that's the gift of using mindfulness as a lens on the Parsha, is that it gives us entree to the mystical way of understanding the text, which is that this is not a historical text, or it is a historical text, it's a literary text, but it's more than that. It's actually a description of processes and dynamics that are happening right now that we can directly experience in our mind, our emotions, our body, etc.
I love that. I think that's really true. And it just like, it's so visceral.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not just the wrestling match itself, but the before and after, like the fact that he's alone and it's like really clearly written, he is alone. And isn't that the way? Like, don't these things so often happen when we're alone? Even if there's other people around, when we're like in our own experience, that's when so often we have to grapple with the biggest changes or these big emotions, these big moments in our lives and transformational moments. And then I love the after that he's limping, that he had
Mm-hmm.
not come away from these matches like unscathed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful experience. And he's like grateful for the experience, clearly. And yet, like something has really changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's get into some of those details that you presented. And Henry's asking if there was which the eternal question, who is Jacob wrestling with? And there's like obviously, as you pointed out, you really can't tell. It's one of the ambiguity of that passage is so great because like it's a little bit like what happens at Mount Sinai too. They're like, who's where, what's going on? And there's this kind of cloud around it, which blurs that line. So you say like, I got to know, who is it? It's like, no, you you have to adopt a stance of not knowing because it's impossible to know. Um, so yeah, maybe it's himself, maybe it's the other. I guess what I got from that uh, is it Louise Gluck? Is that how you say her name?
Yeah.
Um, is that idea of the inseparability and the idea that every one of us has a part, everyone, that we're all connected in some way. We have this illusion that we're separate, but actually that's a story that says we're all connected. And that the wound, here's where I want to connect the wound, or the hip part, is the woundedness reminds us of the interconnectedness in some way,
Mm.
maybe um, that's what I was getting from this was because here you got two twin brothers, right, who like were together from the get-go, and who turn into mortal enemies. and then are reunited. And then, by the way, spoiler alert, they go their separate ways, and that this is it, except to bury their father. They don't get together. They only get together for the funeral, but they have a moment. They have a moment, or at least Jacob has that moment, right, where he recognizes that I see you, right? And I know that we are connected, and that's that we're all sitting here in our different places. I found that very powerful. We're all sitting here with our wounds. We're all sitting here with this awareness that we really need each other. This is very, very powerful. And I want to get to the question about the hip, like what the hip represents. But even that little part about what that verb means about struggling, wrestling, as like kind of intertwining.
Yeah.
Is that where you're going with that? Like it's all, it all looks separate, but actually it's all intertwined.
Yes, I didn't have time to share it, but
Right.
in the Jastrow dictionary, that same root, avec,
Mm-hmm.
avak or avec is to entangle, to twist, to twine, or it's also to be attached to or to cling to. So we're like, this is so interesting. Like this wrestling is also this entanglement. And I love it. It's so powerful.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I got from that also is that I always think of the wrestling part sounds like antagonistic, whereas this has to do with like kind of this like just kind of twisting together and being connected in that way. There
Yeah.
is a question about like to say maybe say a little bit more about because I don't know anything about the chakras or anything about that. So or the
Yeah.
Vedic, I appreciated that. Can you say a little bit more about the function or how we might understand bringing attention to the hips?
Yes. And I should preface by saying, like, I'm still very much a beginner in understanding this system, but my understanding is that there's several different energy centers in the body, kind of mapping from the crown all the way down to what's called the root chakra, which is the first chakra at the very root of our bodies. And each one represents different energies in the body. So the one that's in the hip area has all of these things in it, and it makes sense if you think about it. It's like emotions. Who among us has not felt a whole lot of emotions in the belly area? Or if
Mm-hmm.
you've had pain in the lower back, they say that that's associated with unprocessed emotion.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then, so when I say it's the seat of healing, it's because that's where emotion lives, but also that's where they say, according to my understanding, some of our earliest relationships,
Mm.
some of the emotions surrounding those early relationships are also stored in that area of the body. And it's also, again, it doesn't take a lot to understand to like, it's intuitive that that's also where our creativity lies, because it's where wombs are in some
Mm-hmm.
bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Bodies, we all came from wombs.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that is in that one area, that part of the body that's encircled by the hips. So I find it just interesting that, like, what's changing within Jacob in these parts of his body that correspond to this system.
Mm. Jerry in the chat is bringing up that phrase "joined at the hip,"
Mm,
um, which is interesting. Joined at the hip and attached at the hip are idioms that refer to two individuals so close to one another they are practically one person.
mm,
Um, and as Jerry was writing that, I was thinking about when you mentioned womb and the connection between the womb and the hips. Um, I thought about Jacob and Esau wrestling in the womb, and the
mm,
proximity of the hip to the womb as as lifting up that intense, deep connection, as if they were. I think that whole phrase, you really kind of expand it, say like, well, we are all attached at the hip, just as we were today, right? By
mm,
bringing attention to our hips, we're all attached at the hip, as if we are one person, because on some level we actually are one
mm,
person, and we have glimpses of that.
mm.
Um, All right, Michael asked a question and let's close. Spiritual practice teaches tolerance for uncertainty while our secular culture values clarity. Can you foresee them merging? Oh boy. um, uh, let's just take a moment with that for a second. So, spiritual practice is about cultivating not knowing. Secular culture values knowing, clarity, certainty. I guess maybe another way to phrase that is how can we relate practice to that, an integration of knowing and not, because really it's not just about not knowing, because if we adopted that, we would be completely relativistic. We would never land on anything, right?
Mhm.
And Jewish tradition kind of does integrate those. Certainly Jewish legal tradition does, because there's the halakha, which is like the answer for the moment, and there's the process of halakha, which says like, yeah, that's the truth in this moment, but you know, next month we might see or experience something that leads to a change in that. It's fluid in that way, fixed and fluid. Anyway, what's the connection between not knowing and knowing?
I think you said it so beautifully. I think it is this dance, this holding of the two that we're always engaged in, like
Mm-hmm.
always. If we get too fixed, it's like, I don't know if you know the prayer after, I know you know, but I don't know if everybody knows the prayer after you go to the bathroom. States like if one part was closed when it was supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be open, or one part was open when it's supposed to be closed, I couldn't stand before you, God, today.
Right.
And this is like the thing, like we can't get too fixed, but we also can't be too open because
Mm-hmm.
we can't live like that. So it's just the both, it's holding the both.
Yeah. Thinking about it in terms of just like, meditation practice, like I think, oh, we're sitting here and think, oh, I figured it out. Like, I figured it out. The hip, the wound, the connection, blah blah blah. I got it now, right? And
Yeah.
like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
It's just like it's just an idea. And then when I realize I don't, then I'm back to not knowing and being curious, back to curiosity, which is another way of phrasing this, like the difference between curiosity and conviction.
Mm.
Not that conviction doesn't have a place, but we're here to practice. We have so much, we spend so much time in the world of conviction. We're here to practice curiosity, right? As a counterbalance. So,
Yes.
all right, Yael, great, wonderful as always. Big treat and a lot of appreciation in the chat. Good luck with your mindful pitching on Sunday. And also, just a quick reminder speaking of pitches, pitch for Flourish. For those for whom this applies, Monday noon, there's informational session with Yael and Mary Margles. Much gratitude to you, Yael. Thank you so much, Natalie, and each of you. Wishing everyone a sweet, restorative